shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? I give the call to the member for Barara.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, for the last 15 months, Jewish Australians have been subjected to harassment, doxing, firebombing, death threats and terror plots. Today we've seen revelations of New South Wales health workers calling for Israeli patients to be refused treatment and claiming to have murdered Israelis under their care. Prime Minister, the Australian Jewish community is living in fear. How did the country get to this point?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Barrow for his question. I have seen this anti-Semitic video. It's driven by hate and it's disgusting. The comments are vile, the footage is sickening and it is shameful. These anti-Semitic comments have no place, certainly in our health system, but no place anywhere else in Australia either. Overwhelmingly, people in our health system, our nurses, our doctors, our orderlies, they go into the health system because they care about their fellow Australians, their fellow humans. The idea that people would perpetrate the language and hate and vile that is there in this video versus they're talking, I'm not sure of the format. It's apparently some format where people can talk to each other in different countries. The person they're talking to is speaking about peace and is someone who's being very respectful back in amongst this extraordinary provocation. These individuals, the New South Wales Government has acted, the New South Wales Health Minister. They've been stood down by the New South Wales authorities. They've rightly been referred to the New South Wales Police for criminal investigation. I've had a discussion with the AFP Commissioner, Commissioner Kershaw, about these matters, and they have offered whatever assistance is required at this stage that has been not requested. And I'll make this point. It is very clear to me that these people have committed what are crimes, and they should face the full force of the law.
Give the call to the member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How is the Albanese Labor government helping more Australians into homes, and what alternatives would leave Australians worse off?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Thanks to the member for Dunkley for her question, but also being a champion for affordable housing in her community and right around Australia. This government is coming at the housing challenge from every responsible angle, and we've got a really ambitious agenda. Build to rent, help to buy, $32 billion of investment, working with the states and territories, training construction workers, and also some important steps which we have announced today. I've asked the regulators and the banks to take a more reasonable approach to student debt and the financing of new apartment blocks, and the regulators have agreed to do that. For too long there's been an ambiguity here, and we are clearing that up. Student debt is different to other kinds of debt. It should be, and now it will be, treated differently. So these are common sense changes which will help build more homes and get more people into homes. The changes were agreed in the Universities Accord. They go hand in hand with our efforts to cut student debt and also to take pressure off young people in other ways, including our cost of living help. Now, Mr Speaker, you would assume a change this important and this simple would receive the overwhelming and enthusiastic support of the Parliament, but apparently not, Mr Speaker. Even more surprising was the nature of the criticism in the press release that we got from the Shadow Treasurer. And he said that the problem with this announcement was, and I quote, "This announcement provides no new money." Mr Speaker, and the very important reason why it provides no new money is because it doesn't cost any money, Mr Speaker. The same bin fire of economic incoherence over there, which says we are spending too much money on housing, now says that we are spending too little, Mr Speaker. What an absolute clown show it is over there. Now, the reason why this is so surprising is if you think about the $350 billion in cuts that they have in store for the Australian people, but they won't tell them about. Housing is included in that total, billions and billions of dollars that they would cut from housing. Housing is a big part of their secret costs and secret cuts when we need as a country more homes, not fewer homes. They can't find the $350 billion they say they'll cut or the $600 billion they'll need for their nuclear fantasy without coming after housing, Mr Speaker. Their cuts to housing are another way that they will make Australians worse off and take Australia backwards. They see investment in housing as wasteful spending, but we don't. We see it as a very important way to get more people into homes, to ease the cost of living and build Australia's future.
The call to the Shadow Treasurer.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The Albanese Labor government has created a cost of living crisis, a gas crisis, a crime crisis, a rent crisis, an energy crisis and a housing crisis. Living standards have suffered the biggest collapse in the developed world. Australian households have been in recession for more than 700 days, the longest on record. Prime Minister, why are Australians paying the price for Labor's economic incompetence?
There was far too much noise during the asking of that question. If members on my right interject, they won't be here to hear the answer. It's highly disorderly. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Well, I thank the Shadow Treasurer for his very tight question there, and I'll try to go through some of the items, Mr Speaker. Well, our economy, of course, is growing. Unlike most of the advanced economies in the world, we haven't had a single quarter of negative growth. We've continued to have positive growth. Inflation is down to 2.4%,
The member for
down
Fisher,
from the 6% that we inherited. Wages are up, Mr Speaker. Inflation down, wages up. As a result, indeed, pay packets growing at the fastest pace since 2012 is very important. And, of course, at the same time, we have delivered tax cuts for every single taxpayer, opposed by those opposite, because we want people to earn more and we want people to keep more of what they earn. Earn more and keep more of what they earn. Those opposite want people to work longer for less. Unemployment is, of course, low. We have had the fastest employment growth, faster than any of the G7 nations, and we're really proud of that. 1.1 million jobs created on our watch, more than any government since Federation. So you would think at a time where we have had global economic difficulties, global inflation have had an impact around the world, that when you piece all that together, economy growing, inflation down, unemployment low, wages up, you would think that there would be some support from those
Shadow
opposition.
Treasurer has asked
but
his
in
question.
fact, it's happened in spite of their opposition, because all of our cost of living measures, whether it was energy bill relief, cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines, extra bulk bill GP appointments, free TAFE, the largest rent assistance increase in 30 years, student debt relief for 3 million families. They've opposed every single one of those measures. And indeed, if they had their way, Australians would be $7,200 worse off on average. And if they get their way, Australians know the great risk of this mob is the $350 billion in cuts that they've said they will make, but they won't tell you what they will be, and that's before they make room for their $600 billion nuclear fantasy. So I thank the Shadow Treasurer very much for his question.
Concluded. Before I call the member for Wills, I'll just do some acknowledgements and welcomes to the Parliament. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of the Republic of North Macedonia, His Excellency Mr. Tiem Tuski, along with the Ambassador, Her Excellency Ms. Biljana Stevovska, We have Mr Mark Parton and the Distinguished Visitors Gallery, the Speaker of the ACT Assembly. Present in the gallery today are representatives from the Red Meat Advisory Council, members of the Property Council with their new President Kamal Hourigan, and I see a former member for Eden Monero, Mike Kelly, who's here today with representatives from the Australia-Israel Allies Caucus, a multi-faith and multi-partisan network, and the Latrobe City Mayor Dale Harriman and the Deputy Mayor Sharon Gibson as guests of the member for Gippsland, and finally members and representatives from the Sydney Swans. Welcome to you all. I give the call to the honourable member for Wills.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing and Homelessness. How is the Albanese government alleviating housing stress for more Australians, helping first home buyers by making it easier to save for a deposit and getting people into their own home sooner? And what are the alternatives?
Good question.
Give the call to the Minister for Housing and the Minister for Homelessness.
Thank you, Speaker, and I really want to thank the member for Wills for that question. Housing is an absolutely massive issue in his electorate. We've met together with some of his young constituents and they've talked to me about the difficulties that they're facing with this urgent national problem. And, Speaker, it's partly due to the advocacy of the member for Wills that we are part of the boldest and most ambitious Australian government on housing in more than a generation. Now, Speaker, when it comes to housing, there's going to be a really clear choice ahead for the Australian people. On this side of the parliament, we've got a Labor government that's investing $32 billion to build more homes for Australians, to help renters and to support Australians into home ownership. On that side, we've got an opposition that wants to cut $19 billion out of housing funding in the middle of a housing crisis. On this side of the parliament, we're working with the states to build 1.2 million homes around the country. On that side, they want to lower the national ambition and scrap a housing target altogether. On this side of the parliament, Speaker, we're investing $10 billion to build tens of thousands of social and affordable homes through the Housing Australia Future Fund. On that side of the parliament, they want to scrap the Housing Australia Future Fund, rip up the $10 billion and instead start a $10 billion long lunch tab for corporate bosses. Are you serious? On this side of the parliament, we're investing in building 55,000 social and affordable homes. On that side of the parliament, they produced 9,000 social and affordable homes in their entire decade in office. Speaker, on this side of the House, we've invested $1.2 billion in crisis housing in 3 years. In 3 years, Speaker, we've invested 20 times as much as the Coalition did in their 9 years in office. 20 times as much. Speaker, on this side of the parliament, we've helped 140,000 Australians get into the property market with lower mortgage deposits. That's more than double those on the other side of the parliament, who only helped 60,000. Speaker, on this side of the parliament, we've helped 1 million Australian households struggling to pay their rent with a 45% increase in Commonwealth rent assistance. On that side of the parliament, they didn't increase Commonwealth rent assistance once beyond CPI in the entire 9 years that they were in office. On our side of the parliament, we're training 55,000 tradies that we need to help us build more homes for the country. Over there, they call fee-free TAFE wasteful spending. Now, Speaker, we've got a really clear contrast here between a bold and ambitious government and a coalition that has absolutely no plan for housing. Remember, Speaker, that when they were last in government, they were so checked out of housing that for most of the time that they were in government, they didn't even have a Commonwealth Housing Minister. Speaker, they've spent the last 3 years trying to block and delay critical housing measures. There's a choice here between going back to the bad old days with a negative opposition that ignored the problem for a decade, or letting the Albanese government get on the job with dealing with the housing challenges faced by Australians.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition, there was far too much noise during that answer. I appreciate there will be interjections, but not continual interjections. So moving forward, to assist the House, I'd like you to cease interjecting. Give the call to the honourable member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Currently, billionaires are making out like bandits, while everyone else is being squeezed. Yesterday, the Greens announced a plan for Australia's 150 billionaires to pay an annual 10% billionaire tax on their net wealth, which would raise $50 billion over the decade. Prime Minister, do you agree it is time billionaires paid their fair share to ensure everyone can get access to the services they need, such as seeing the GP for free?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Brisbane for his question, and I'm surprised that he stopped at 10%. Why not 20, 30, 40, 50? Because that's the difference between a political party that seeks to form government and a party of protest that can say whatever they like. Things don't have to add up as long as it sounds good. We believe very clearly.
So do you. You take them too.
I'll take the interjection. The reason why there are Queensland Greens in this House is because the Queensland LNP chose to target Jackie Trad and put a Queensland Green in the Queensland Parliament. That is why they sit up there in the corner, Mr. Speaker. That is precisely why that occurred. So when we come to the question that's been asked, I certainly believe in a fair taxation system, and I believe that people should pay their fair share. And I understand certainly that there is concern, particularly amongst young Australians, that they aren't getting a fair crack, which is why we have a range of measures, be it the measures that the Housing Minister just indicated, to deal with affordability of housing going forward. That is why, as well, we, upon being elected, will cut student debt by 20%, following up from the $3 billion that we cancelled already. When we weigh up a budget and a fiscal position, we always look for what is fair, but what we do as well is make sure that things are responsible and that they do add up. And the sort of gestures, I understand, populism of either the left or the right is a bit of a fashion these days. But what we do as a responsible party of Australia's centre-left is to put forward responsible policies that add up, that seek to keep an economy growing, that seek to have ongoing investment in the creation of jobs and growth in our economy, that seek to make sure that no one is left behind by making sure that we have an appropriate welfare system and appropriate social services, be it in education or health, but also that we make sure no one's held back. We are the party of opportunity, so we look for opportunity at every attempt, and that is why we are the party of progress, not the party of protest.
Give a call to the honourable member for Gilmore.
My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting regional communities and regional airlines, and what has been the response?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Gilmore for her question and for coming with me and the member for Eden-Monaro and the Transport Minister this morning, being joined by the Mayor of Bega there at Merimbula Airport for this important announcement, confirming that as part of our building of Australia's future, this government will support regional airlines. We have announced that we'll support Rex and ensure that regional communities have access to crucial air services. Without those air services, not only will people not have access to our big capital cities, they won't have access to health services that they need, that visit to the doctor. You won't be able to support the tourism sector. A lot of freight also goes on that transport as well, which is so important. Now, to ensure Rex operates beyond the administration cut-off date of June 30, we'll work with shortlisted bidders to maximise a successful sale. If there's no sale, we'll work on contingency plans with relevant state governments, including the potential for Commonwealth acquisition. We'll provide a waiver of the use it or lose it test for Rex regional flight slots at Sydney Airport as well. Now, this comes on top of our $80 million loan to keep Rex operating until the 30th of June and our acquisition of $50 million of debt from Rex's largest creditor. We also announced this morning $12 million for upgrades to regional airports in New South Wales. Now, this airline is absolutely critical for a range of communities that are serviced only by Rex. If you take it away, you isolate those communities. I know the member for Riverina understands this and has indeed been an advocate of the sort of policies that were put forward earlier today. But the member, I'm asked about what the response has been. The member for Farrer said this: government shouldn't own airlines because that does mean that taxpayers own them and taxpayers pay for them. So it's okay for governments to invest $600 billion in nuclear reactors, but it's not okay to invest to make sure that regional communities like Winton, in the leader of the National Party's electorate, like Maria, like Ceduna, like a range of communities, continue to have access to aviation services. It is just extraordinary that, once again, their gut instinct is just to say no. Well, what we will do is work constructively with those regional communities. We'll also work with people in the aviation sector, constructively to see we want there to be a private sector buyer of Rex. But if not, we won't leave those.
Call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister rule out appointing his close friend Alan Joyce as CEO of the new Albo Air?
Order. Order. Yeah, I didn't hear. If members on my right, I just didn't hear the end part of the question. I heard about Mr Joyce. Order. Order. Members on my left, I just want to make sure we get this right. We'll do this in an orderly way. Every member is entitled to ask the question of their choice. The Leader of the House, on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, the question is simply out of order. It's as simple as that. It makes a question has to refer to ministerial responsibilities. Yeah. The tag at the end, I respect that you didn't hear it, but it would be to repeat an abuse. The member knows full well that he was asking that question for the purpose of getting up a grab. He knows he was not referring to a government agency. The question is completely out of order.
Look, can I just make sure and to ask the manager's assistance, just to make sure the question was within standing orders and the responsibility of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is happy to answer the question. Okay. The Leader, I said we would do this in an orderly way. You don't need to jump down my throat. We're just going to deal with one situation at a time. Order. The Minister for Regional Development is warned. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Having seen the mess that the previous people who were operating Rex Airlines, who have close links with a political party, not ours, in having delusions of grandeur, being given by the former government $150 million untied of taxpayers' money during the pandemic, on top of JobKeeper, who chose, rather than fix up the Saab aircraft, who chose, with delusions of grandeur, to buy or lease big aircraft to try and compete on Sydney to Melbourne route, and drove an airline into the ground, following the following airlines that were grounded under the former government: Pacific Express, JetGo, Skytrans, Air Pelican, Brindabella, Tiger and Virgin all went into either administration or fell apart. We fix the problems that they created, and they come up with that sort of childishness. For, as we've said before, the only time Alan Joyce got to a Prime Minister's residence was under the former government, Scott Morrison. But that's the sort of nonsense, and that shows how seriously they take regional Australia. Let me name these towns: Ceduna, Maria, Narrandera, Parkes, Cooper Pedy, Esperance, Carnarvon, Winton and Mornington Island. You know what they have in common? They would all be isolated from being able to get health care. They'd all be isolated from being able to get freight. They'd all be isolated from those small businesses being able to operate properly. And every one of them are being represented by those people over there. But they have this contempt for them that this clown asks a question like that, Mr. Speaker. Well, here's what a serious member of the National Party had to say. If not for Rex, went on to say, they wouldn't be able to get doctors, nurses, vaccines and, most importantly, medication. People in those towns would also then not be able to make it to their capital city medical appointments. But it's more than just health, and we all know that. It's business, it's tourism, it's so many aspects of modern living. That is why he went on to say, I've raised the possibility of the federal government having an equity stake in Rex to ensure the airline's future. That's a real leader sitting down the end over there for the National Party. And you, sir, are not fit to represent a serious job in this parliament.
Order. 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 The member for Fremantle. Order. The member for Barker is now warned. He may... Yes, you. You may sit a long way away, but trust me, I can still hear your meaningful contributions. When the House comes to order, we shall hear from the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to support and secure aviation in regional Australia? Are there other approaches that will leave regional Australians worse off?
Call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And I think you just saw the incredible contrast just then. The member for Bendigo, serious about regional aviation, knows the economic importance it is to the regions, and the joke of a question that was asked just by those opposite, and the deputy opposition leader giggling away about the whole thing in terms of regional aviation. Now, Albanese Labor government believes that regional and remote communities do deserve reliable, affordable and accessible air travel. It is why we are taking steps to ensure that communities outside capital cities aren't just short-changed. Today we of course announced that the government will support shortlisted bidders in a second sale process for Rex Airlines to maximise the prospect of a successful sale and to ensure that crucial regional aviation services continue beyond the 30th of June 2025. We have been clear that the Commonwealth is not a bidder in this second sales process, and we want to see a successful market-led outcome. This is a strong signal to the market that we are willing to work with them to land a deal. But we have also been clear, if there is no sale, we will look at contingency options, including preparations necessary for potential Commonwealth acquisition. When markets fail or struggle to deliver for regional communities, the government absolutely has a role to ensure that people do not miss out on opportunities, education and critical connections. The same is true of telecommunications as well. We're recognising that today and stepping in to keep these routes flying. Today's announcement has been welcomed by the Australian Local Government Association, Australian Airports Association, the Australian Travel Industry Association, but I know who's not welcomed it, which is very surprising, those members opposite of the Liberal and National Party, where we saw the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party and the member for Farrer, who has Rex Airlines flying in there, told Sky News that she does not support the government's intervention or assistance, and what the Liberals and Nationals have made clear is that they would rather see the largest regional airlines in Australia fail, individual routes flogged off and regional Australians absolutely abandoned. They have no plan to secure regional aviation, and in fact they believe government involvement is a bridge too far. But $600 billion of publicly owned, taxpayer-funded nuclear reactors is not a bridge too far. You can see the absolute contrast when it comes to supporting regional aviation, supporting regional communities in what we just saw from a joke of the question for the member for Deakin.
The call to the honourable member for Fairfax. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question goes to the Prime Minister. The Albanese Labor government has created a cost of living crisis, a gas crisis, a crime crisis, a rent crisis, an energy crisis and a housing crisis. The Prime Minister promised on nearly 100 occasions that he would cut power bills by $275 a year. With families now paying up to $1,000 more than Labor promised, can the Prime Minister point to a single Australian paying less for energy now than they were 3 years ago?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. We have faced serious global challenges over the past 3 years, and Australians have done the hard work. Australians have done the hard work to turn things around, and we are seeing results. The fact is that inflation is coming down to 2.4% from the 6% plus that we inherited. Wages are rising, making a substantial difference as well. Taxes have been lowered as a result of the government's changes that we made, legislated through this parliament, that those opposite said we should call an election over. They hated it so much. And of course we have had a range of cost of living measures that I'm asked about. All of those cost of living measures have something in common. They were all opposed by those opposite, including the member for Fairfax. The member for Fairfax was one of those people who opposed our $300 rebate on energy bills for every single Australian household. Now, that has made a difference. Opposed by those opposite, just like they opposed cheaper medicines that have benefited Australians to the tune of over $1 billion. They opposed cheaper childcare that have delivered cheaper costs on average of around about $2,700. They have opposed the measures that we've put in place, but they have come up with some policies, Mr. Speaker, including the member for Fairfax. They came up with 3 policies in total. So to give the member for Fairfax credit, he is 1/3 of the brains trust of those opposite. They came up with a $600 billion nuclear plan. $600 billion. $600 billion. Then they came up with, of course, another plan, $10 billion for long lunches for business. They had that. But then, of course, they've come up with a third plan announced on the Insiders program that they're going to cut everything to pay for it. They won't tell you what they're going to cut.
Prime Minister will pause. The Minister for Agriculture, I'm going to hear from the member for Fairfax on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is on relevance because the question to the Prime Minister was if he could point to a single Australian paying less for energy now than they were 3 years ago. He is not addressing that question whatsoever.
Order. Members on my right, the member for Gorton. The question had a lot of moving parts to it. Order. Appreciate the Leader of the Opposition is giving me some wise counsel, but on this chance, with so many moving parts to a question, if you're going to contain a lot, and sometimes we've had tight questions this week, I absolutely agree with that. This is broad by anyone's definition. So if the Prime Minister is talking about relief or any of the topics that you had at the beginning, he's going to be directly relevant and he's going to be heard in silence.
Mr. Speaker. They don't want people to know about the 3 policies that they've got. I'm just trying to help them out, Mr. Speaker. Just trying to help them out, Mr. Speaker. But make no mistake, if this bloke becomes Prime Minister over here, he'll be sending Australians the bill. That is the fact. He'll make you pay. He will make you pay. You won't get lunch, but you will pay the bill. When the lunch bill comes, for those through your taxes that you will pay for. You won't get any electricity from nuclear reactors either, but you'll pay the bill. You'll pay the bill. And that is all you get from those opposite. Just complaints, talking Australia down. I mean, yesterday he was out there cheering for higher interest rates, this Leader of the Opposition as well, because they don't want Australia to succeed, because they see that as a way through for them.
Concluded. Call to the honourable member for Fraser.
My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to cut student debt and support students and graduates. Are there any alternative approaches?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend, the phenomenal member for Fraser, for his question.
Order.
Mr Speaker, he knows that education is the most powerful cause for good in this country, that a good education can change lives and that a good education system can change countries, that it's changed ours, but that there's more to do to make our education system better and fairer than it is today. And that's what the reforms that we're making are all about. Reforms to early education, to help more kids get ready for school, to school education, to help more kids finish school, and to TAFE and to university, to help more people get into the course that they want for the skills that they need to build the career of their dreams, to build the life of their dreams. And as part of that, last year we cut $3 billion of student debt for more than 3 million Australians. And this year, if we win the election, we'll go further. If we win the election, Labor will cut another 20% from all student debts. Now, that means for someone with an average debt today of $27,000, they'll see $5,500 wiped off it. It'll help them to pay it off faster, and that'll help a lot of young people to be able to buy a home sooner. The Liberal Party want you to burn through your super to buy a house. They want you to cut into your retirement savings. We want to cut your debt. And it's not the only thing that we're doing. We'll also reduce the amount of money that you have to repay in your student debt every year. That means more money in your pocket, not the government's, helping people with the cost of living. And as the Treasurer has announced today, we're also working with regulators and with the banks to help make sure that having a student debt doesn't stop you from buying a home, to make sure that you're treated fairly by the banks when you apply for a home loan. This is all part of building a better and a fairer education system, to building Australia's future. That's what our education system does. It's what a good education does. It makes sure that no one's held back and no one's left behind. And that's what Labor governments are all about. It's what we've always been about, helping to make sure that more kids finish school and then can go on to TAFE or to uni to do the course of their dreams. And there's the difference. The only courses the Liberal Party care about are entree, main and dessert. A bit of gratis gravlax, a bit of subsidised spatchcock, maybe a bit of free flambe. That's their policy. That's their policy. Taxpayers' money literally on fire, all courtesy of the Liberal Party of Australia.
The House comes to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Dawson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Albanese Labor government has created a cost of living crisis, a gas crisis, a crime crisis, a rent crisis, an energy crisis and a housing crisis. New Motor Trades Association analysis confirms that Labor's family car and ute tax will slug Australians thousands of dollars more for a family car and ute. When Australians are paying more for everything, why is this government imposing thousands of dollars of additional costs on Australians in this Labor-created cost of living crisis?
Order. Yeah, don't worry. Just order. Members on my right. I know what the Leader of the House is going to say, but I'll predict it. But I'll listen to it.
Mr. Speaker, the section of standing orders that deals with question time starts with the principle that it has to involve a question. That one went for 30 seconds without a question, and therefore the call ordinarily would go to the next side.
By about 20 seconds.
Look, this has been a feature of this parliament. When this side reads out their question and it's time, I get the time from that side. And when that side, when ministers get the answers, I get the time from. You can't have it both ways. Okay? So there was far too much in that preamble. That is obvious, because it went on for too long before you got to the question. So it will make my job easier if people just stick to the time limits. They practice their questions to within 30 seconds, and ministers keep within 3 minutes. So for the remainder of this week, I don't want anyone yelling out time, because it cuts both ways. I'm feeling generous today, so the question will stand. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'll do my best to give an answer to a non-question, Mr Speaker. I'll do my best.
Order.
I'll do my best, but I'm asked in general about cost of living.
Order.
And I'm happy to speak about cost of living, Mr Speaker, because it's only this side of the parliament that have raised cost of living measures, that have taken action on cost of living through each of our 3 budgets, and indeed every day in this parliament through question time. While those opposite have looked for culture wars, have looked for things they can create arguments over where Australians aren't interested in, which have engaged in the sort of nonsense that we've seen here today, expressing, quite frankly, contempt for regional communities that those opposite represent in their own electorates, including, of course, the regional communities in Queensland. Now, it stands in stark contrast, I'm sure, with people like David Crisafulli, who I spoke this morning, as well, who's up there in North Queensland dealing with real issues in those communities. Now, it says a lot about the priorities that those opposite have had with the nature of the questions they've had today. Having come into this parliament, voted against cheaper medicines, energy rebates, cheaper childcare, the crackdown on supermarkets, voted against tax cuts for every single taxpayer, they then try to get their act together with a 2-page question, which they don't get to. I mean, this morning we had production tax credits go through the parliament without a vote because they didn't have anyone in here. I know they're down to 50-something, Mr Speaker, but you'd think 2 of them could turn up. Yesterday we had the poor old shadow minister try and call a division as well, and didn't have a seconder. Didn't have a seconder for it.
Order.
They have lost their way, Mr Speaker. They have not been capable of developing a coherent policy alternative. As I've said, just 3 policies they will take to the election at this stage: the $600 billion nuclear reactor plan, the $10 billion for long lunches, which, of course, $10 billion could buy you a fair bit, 9 million free services in public hospitals, 139 million GP visits, 78 million prescriptions, the annual salary of 90,000 nurses. But oh no, the priority of those opposite is free lunches for some, paid for by every single taxpayer. And the other thing, of course, is cuts, but they won't tell you until after the election.
Call to the honourable member for Paterson.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government making medicines cheaper for Australian women by listing the first new contraceptive pills and menopausal hormone therapies on the pharmaceutical benefits scheme? How is it that these medicines have been left off the PBS for so long, Minister?
Call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care. The member for New England is warned.
Thanks, Speaker. I appreciate the interjections from the member for New England on women's health, but I particularly appreciate the question from the member. She's such a strong advocate for healthcare here and in the Hunter, and she tells me, like so many members of our caucus do, reminding us that women right across the course of their life face really significant medical and medicine costs, not because they're sick, but because they're women, particularly around contraception and during menopause and perimenopause. The PBS is a great system, Mr Speaker, but it's got to be kept up to date if it serves the interests of Australians. I'm proud we've made almost 300 new and expanded listings for the PBS, including the first listing of a new endometriosis drug, Vazan, in more than 30 years. But it has to be said that too often the PBS has not been meeting the needs of Australia's women. There has been no new oral contraceptive pill listed on the PBS for more than 30 years. No new menopausal hormone treatment for more than 20 years. And that is why I wrote to the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee urging them to work with industry to rectify that. And I'm so delighted to say that all that changes in a couple of weeks' time on the 1st of March. 2 new oral contraceptive pills, Yaz and Yasmin, that are used by tens of thousands of Australian women, will finally go onto the PBS, saving all those women between $200 and $350 a year, Mr Speaker. And on the same day, 3 new menopausal hormone treatments will go onto the PBS as well, used by 150,000 women every year as well. Treatments like Estrogel Pro, which costs about $670 a year but is truly life-changing, as Ali Pepper, Australia's most accomplished female mountaineer, told us on Sunday when we were launching the policy. Women will save up to $580 a year after these listings take effect in a short while. This package, Mr Speaker, reverses decades of neglect and inaction and finally delivers Australia's women more choice, better care and lower costs for these areas. And it builds on all of our other cheaper medicines measures that already have saved Australians $1.2 billion at the pharmacy counter. Important cost of living relief, which of course was opposed by the Leader of the Opposition. So I was intrigued, Mr Speaker, to read that Senator Cash on Sunday had said that they support our package because apparently it builds on what they had done in government, which was surprising, of course, because there was not a single endometriosis medicine, not a single oral contraceptive pill, not a single menopause hormonal treatment added to the PBS in their 9 years. But of course, it was only 9 years. What on earth can you do in a time that short?
Give the call to the honourable member for North Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Minister, for too long Australians were placed at the bottom of the list in terms of priority access to low-emissions vehicles, and without intervention, transport will be the largest source of emissions in Australia by 2030. The people of North Sydney, who are surrounded by major freeways and roads, are living with the consequences of that in terms of poor air quality. We fought for and welcomed the new vehicle efficiency standards that have come into effect this year. But with misinformation regarding the impacts of these standards rife, could you please provide an update on them, including their expected impact on both the uptake and price of vehicles?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for North Sydney for her question and very genuinely thank her for her leadership and engagement on this issue and other issues across this parliament, Mr Speaker. Now, as the member for North Sydney knows, and as the House will recall, Australia and Russia were the only 2 major economies without new vehicle efficiency standards. The key word there is were, because on the 1st of January that changed, with our new vehicle efficiency standards coming into force to give Australians better choices of motor vehicles. It was in the too hard basket for too long, and we put it on the to-do list and we got it done. Passed by the parliament with the support of the crossbench and, of course, opposed by the Liberal and National Party, despite them trying to do it when they were in office. And what this means, Mr Speaker, is more choice for Australian motorists, and it builds on what we've already done. We're already seeing it having an impact, even though it only came into force on the 1st of January. The number of EVs available in Australia, the range of choices, has tripled since May 2022. When we came to office, there were no electric vehicles available for sale in Australia under $45,000. There are now 8, Mr Speaker. 8 models available under $45,000. There are now utes available. The BYD electric hybrid ute has sold very well at a cost of $60,000 since it was introduced just before Christmas. These are the sorts of options and choices we want to give Australians. And, of course, this leads to lower running costs, lower petrol costs for motorists. And to be fair and with respect to the member for North Sydney, and she did advocate it, and I'm sure her constituents do benefit from it, but actually the people who really benefit from this policy are people in the outer suburbs and regions, the people who drive for longer distances. That is the fact, Mr Speaker. They are the people who benefit. So, for example, an average motorist in the electorate of Mitchell would benefit, Mr Speaker, compared to a motorist in the electorate of North Sydney. $90 billion in overall benefit between now and 2050 in petrol costs, but much more in the outer suburbs. Now, in New South Wales, the suburbs that have taken up the new vehicle discount, the tax cut of the Albanese government, first in New South Wales is Kellerville in the electorate of Mitchell. Second is the electorate of Greenway for the Minister for Communications. Third again is the member for Mitchell. I've got good news for you, Mr Speaker. The biggest take-up of electric vehicles under our policy in Queensland is Springfield in your electorate, sir. So good news for the Speaker. And second is Blair. And in Victoria, the top-selling suburb, for electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles is in the electorate of Lawler, and second is Lawler, and third is Holt. So these are the suburbs and electorates that benefit that those opposite try to deny choice to. Try to deny choice to people in outer suburbs and regions of Australia because they don't really represent outer suburbs and regions, Mr Speaker. Order. This side of the House does.
The House comes to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Immigration. Why is it important to maintain integrity in Australia's visa system? And is the minister aware of any approaches which threaten the integrity of that system?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Speaker, and I thank the member for Robertson for raising an important issue to the House, because the integrity of the visa system in Australia is something that needed to be corrected when we came to government, given what we'd inherited. In October of 2023, this government invested $50 million in compliance. There was a reason why we had to invest additional money in compliance. During the life of the previous government, where the principal person responsible for the portfolio is now the Leader of the Opposition, the number of compliance staff had gone from 360 down to 203. And in terms of compliance, one of the most disturbing visas was what was known as the golden ticket visa, where instead of getting a visa on the basis of having a skill or having a connection to Australia or having a business that employed people, you would get the visa on the basis that you had cash. And that was how that worked. Now, a number of reports came through dealing with the huge problems of integrity in the visa system. I referred previously to the Productivity Commission. We also had the Nixon Review. Let me refer to a report that was taken by the former minister in the Home Affairs portfolio, the member for Latrobe, in the report he gave on the regulation of migration and education agents. This gives a sense of what had happened in integrity in the visa system under them, and these are the words of the member for Latrobe. Organised crime and illegitimate labour hire companies are using this loophole to bring out illegal workers who are often vulnerable and open to exploitation. This represents an orchestrated scam that enables these criminal elements to exploit foreign workers in Australia until their claims are finalised. Now, they're the words of someone who sits on the front bench now of the Leader of the Opposition. A Leader of the Opposition who gets approached at a fundraiser with someone saying, "Can we bring back cash for visas?" and he's straight onto it. If only they'd asked for an au pair as well, he would have been able to deliver that as well. This is a Leader of the Opposition who, no matter how tough he talks, look at what he does, because he votes for students to be unlimited, he votes for cuts to compliance, and he votes to bring back cash for visas.
Order. The manager will return to his seat. The Leader of the House has completed his answer. The Prime Minister has the call.
Further questions be placed on the notice paper.